Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Borderline Podcast with me, your host, Andrew Willox. And tonight, guys, we're back with guest interviews, and we're going straight back across to America to interview a fantastic individual. He's the founder of the Next Level University, a top 100 podcast, and he's created or featured in over 3,000 episodes. His own podcast has over 1 million listeners, appearing in over 170 countries worldwide. He's now a podcast coach and an incredibly inspiring individual. I don't want to give too much away, as his story is truly unique, and I really hope it inspires you, and I, for one, found it incredibly relatable. If you do want to learn more about Kevin, then all of his information is going to be in the episode description below. If you are watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that like button, and do subscribe for further mental health content. Enjoy. Kevin, thank you so much for coming onto the Borderline Podcast this evening and giving me a little bit of your time. Like I said earlier, I'm super excited about this one. You're an incredibly inspiring character, and you're certainly going to be relatable to me and a lot of my guests. How are you doing this evening?
I am doing very well. I appreciate the kind words that you have given me behind the scenes. You said something to me that I think maybe the ultimate compliment was, I really am inspired by the amount you know about yourself.
Oh, wow. Yeah, cool.
There's something to that. That's why I started this in the first place. So I'm excited to chat with you. I love what you're doing. And I'm very, very excited. Yeah,
like I said, I watched a little bit of some of your interviews with other people earlier on today, and I was just blown away by your openness. And like I say, the knowledge that you have of yourself. But obviously, a lot of the listeners won't know who you are, what you're about. So could we just get a little bit of a background of who Kevin is and how you became the person that you are today?
Yeah, today Kevin is the founder, host, and CSO of Next Level University. We're a global top 100 podcast with 1,860 episodes, I think.
Wow.
As of today, over 1 million listens, and we have listeners in 175 plus countries. But obviously that is not where I started, and it has taken a long time to get there. The shortest but most accurate version of my story would be, I was raised by my mom and my grandmother. I didn't know my dad. I didn't meet my dad until I was 27. Lower middle class. We talked often about whether or not we were going to be able to pay rent. So that was kind of my upbringing. The rest of my childhood was normal, all things considered, whatever you want to define normal as. But in high school, Andrew, that's when things started to shift, because I knew I didn't want to go to college. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew college wasn't the answer for me. And actually, in high school, I was training to fight mixed martial arts professionally.
Oh.
That was something I wanted to do for a while. So I graduate high school. I get a job at the local gas station. That was my first ever job. And I worked at the gas station. I was then a truck driver. I was a forklift operator. I cleaned bathrooms and floors at a hospital, construction worker, tiling, on-call firefighter for a very short amount of time. But in my early 20s, I got a job in an industry called weatherization. We go into large buildings and we retrofit them to make them more energy efficient. I went from making $15 an hour in construction to anywhere from $60 to $120 an hour with this new job. And I was convinced, cool, I'm good. Everything's going to work itself out. All the stuff that I've been trying to work so hard for over the last however many years is coming true. I'm going to be successful. So if you looked at me when I was 25, a few years later, I had my dream body because I was competing in a bodybuilding show. My girlfriend at the time was a model, sports car, high-paying job, new apartment, great friends, all of the stuff. But internally, I was miserable. I was depressed. I was anxious. I was insecure. My girlfriend at the time ended up leaving me. And I proceeded to just grind my face off to try to make even more money because I assumed that would fix the rest of the problems. I made the most money I'd ever made at 26. And then 27, I ended up sitting on the edge of a bed contemplating suicide because I was so miserable and I felt so trapped. And I couldn't imagine that the future had any hope or any brightness. I ended up reaching out to a friend of mine who is now my business partner. He talked me off the ledge, so to speak. And then I left that job in 2018 to do this weird podcast thing full time. And I've been doing it full time since 2018. So for 6 years, coming up on 7 years now.
Wow. That's a lot of information to dissect. let's start with, obviously, like you said, you went from a really high paying job to being on the edge of your bed, feeling incredibly suicidal. Did you ever in the past struggle with mental health at all? Is there anything that you could recognize, even when you were doing the job and working a load of hours? Was anxiety an issue for you, or, low self-esteem? Was there any sort of issue for you there?
Low self-esteem was always there. You would just never know it because I didn't want you to know it. And there were certain things so I'm somebody who is very blessed because I've always been in pretty good shape. And then when I started working out, I was always in pretty much better shape than anybody around me.
Yeah.
So you'd never know I had low self-worth, low self-esteem, because this is always the joke. If I was at a party and somebody spilled a drink, my shirt was off before the drink even got all the way over. Because in my mind, that's how I get significance.
Yep.
I might not have what these other guys have, but they don't have what I do. Let me show off the thing that I actually have. So you never really know. So there were 2 other times in my life where I had mental health, things that I would consider mental health red flags, for lack of better phrasing.
Yeah, cool.
One time I was home alone one day from work. I was dating the same girl as I mentioned in that story. I was playing video games, just a day off. It wasn't anything, there was nothing special about that day. And I just remember sitting there thinking to myself, if this is what life is, just this gray, dull existence, I don't know if I want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
I didn't have a plan. I wasn't thinking about anything. It was just, there has to be more than this. My girlfriend got home that day and I told her, and she said, Kev, I really think you should go to therapy. And I said, nah, no. Unnecessary. Don't need it. I am in really good shape. I am a masculine man. I have tattoos. I'm going to be fine. I'll just work through it. Eventually, she broke down the walls and I ended up going to therapy. So that was the first time I'd ever gone to therapy, and it was wonderful. I learned so much about myself. It was awesome. So that was the first time. And then there was one other time where when my girlfriend left me, I knew that I was in a dark place. So I reached out and I got a new therapist. The third time was really okay, something is seriously wrong here. And if I continue on the path that I'm on, I'm going to be in some trouble for sure.
Yeah, like you say, it's obviously great that you recognize the red flags, like you say, and especially the big one that sticks out. A lot of people don't see that, and it's obviously ends up quite tragically different. So, very important that you acted on it and then seek the help, and thankfully here we are today. Going back, something that I again relate to what you were saying earlier. Is it possible that you were almost conforming to an idea of the perception that people had of you, that you were, a big fit guy, you're on a good money, you've got a really attractive girlfriend? Was there an aspect that, obviously, to prevent that mental health from affecting you, you kind of conformed to the idea that others knew you were the strong character, if that makes sense?
I think that was a big piece of it. And I think also it's just human nature to think that if you can acquire the things that you didn't have, all of your problems would go away. I grew up feeling very insignificant, right? I got some attention from women, but not, I don't know. Does anybody get the attention they want from the sex that they're interested in? I don't know. So yeah, I assumed, well, a beautiful girlfriend, that'll fix it. Grew up without money. So if I have money, I shouldn't have any reason to complain. All my problems will get fixed. And I grew up the small, insignificant guy. So if I can get in really good shape, I'll fix all of the insecurities that I had when I was younger. I think that was probably a bigger piece than anything else, is I assumed all the stuff that I was lacking in my upbringing, if I found a way to accumulate that, I wouldn't feel the same way I felt in my upbringing. And that just wasn't the case. So I think it was a mix of those two things. I don't know if I really fell victim to the external definition of other people's success. I don't think I fell as victim to that. This was my own design. I assumed these things were going to fix me. Nobody told me they were going to. So I think it was more that than anything. Even the self-awareness, I was aware of what I was lacking. I wasn't aware enough to understand that even if I got those things, it wasn't going to fix the voids. I just didn't have that level of self-awareness yet.
Oh, yeah. Perfectly explained. Thank you so much for that.
Of course.
And obviously, we just kind of go forward now to that, what I'm going to describe as a life-changing moment on the end of the bed. You're feeling suicidal and you reach out for help. Could you talk about the significance of just reaching out and what the importance was of receiving messages back?
I always say, anytime we talk on this line, I always say that you do not wait until there is a thunderstorm to build the umbrella. You build the umbrella on a sunny day with the understanding that the thunderstorm might come. Yep. So it wasn't super hard for me to reach out to the person I reached out to because we had already been vulnerable with each other. We had already talked about mental health. We talked about relationships, fears, uncertainty, limiting beliefs, all that stuff. It was everything, because I think one of the things that happens is when your back is against that wall, you think to yourself, there's no way the future could be bright. There is no hope. I think that's one of the common things when it comes to mental health is when you feel like you lose hope, I think a lot of us feel like we lose the desire to live. When that's not true. It's not true that there's no hope. It just doesn't feel that way. It just doesn't feel that way. It doesn't mean it's not there. So I reached out to someone who I felt could add value to my situation. And to your point, imagine if I reached out to someone and I said, hey, I'm having these dark thoughts. I'm having these feelings. I don't know what to do. What do you think I should do? I could have got 3 different answers. I could have got the answer that I got from him, which was, Kev, over the last couple of years, your awareness has changed a ton, but your environments have remained the same. I think it's time for you to change your environment. Somebody might have said, Kev, nobody really likes their job. Just be grateful you're making $90 an hour at the job you're at right now. Or, Kev, just get through the week, enjoy the weekend, and next week will be a little bit better. I could have got any of those different things. The advice I got, the person I reached out to had really good stuff to say to me, which really, really helped me. So yeah, having the courage to reach out to someone, unfortunately, I think it starts long before you need to reach out to someone. So what I always say is, if right now life is going great and you don't have that many complaints and your mental health's in a good spot and everything feels good, start building those vulnerable, authentic relationships now. One of the reasons I can talk about a lot of the vulnerable, quote unquote, stuff that I talk about is just because I've talked about it so much that I'm not insecure about that anymore. But if I was still going through it, if I was having a really bad mental health day and you said, Kev, how did you get over all that? And how'd you work through it? I might not have a good answer. I might say, Andrew, I don't know if I could even add value. I don't know if I can talk about that today. Right. So it's kind of all that mixed together.
Yeah, that was 2 huge points there that I'd like to kind of hone back on. Obviously, the quote from your friend, and that's that your, am I right in saying this? Your awareness has changed, but your environment has stayed the same.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean that's so crucial when I think about my own situation as well. You know, I'm assuming by that time you were really running into hating your job and what you were doing, and was that message alone the significance to change your perception and the way that you wanted to live your life?
It gave me a couple things. It gave me permission to make a different decision, and I knew I wouldn't have to do it alone. So Alan and I so I started the podcast in 2017. Alan was my first guest. So him and I already had talked about, well, it'd be really cool to do this full time. What would that look like? So we already had conversations about it. So I kind of knew that, all right, when he gave me that advice, when he gave me that support, when he gave me that perspective, I realized that for this job, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not going to do this job forever. And the podcast is going to be the thing that I do when I leave. Mm-hmm. Is there any certainty there? No, because I'm not making any money and I don't know how to make money. But you know what it did? It created hope. Alan and I are going to partner up and we're going to do this passion project thing together and we're going to see what happens. That really was what it was for me. There was a creation of hope. In a hopeless moment, there was a creation of hope. And I want to add this because I think this is the best example I have that I could possibly share. we were lucky enough to interview somebody on our podcast. His name's Kevin Hines. And Kevin Hines is one of the few individuals who has jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge with the intention of taking his life, but surviving. And he said something very powerful when we talked to him. He said, the second my foot left the railing, I regretted it. And I wanted to take it back. I wanted to go back a second, but I couldn't. That's what I think a lot of us, we just don't know that yet. He felt hopeless. The second he leapt, he realized that there was way more hope than he gave credit to, and he wished he could go back and tie back into that hope. I always throw that out there because all things considered, yes, I had my personal battle and I went through what I went through, but that's a perspective that I don't have. That's a very impactful perspective of somebody who tried to go through with it and realized that they regretted it the second that they did. So I always like to throw that in there too, anytime I'm talking about mental health, just because I feel like that's a really good perspective.
Yeah, that's going to go into the second point there, and that was about hope. You know, it's something that quite recently I'm very open about my own struggles with depression and anxiety, and you're so right. It's hopelessness. It's not hopelessness. It's the fact that there is no hope there, or you can't feel it, as you so correctly say. And that impacts us day to day because that drains and that's exhausting. Do you believe, obviously, over time, the kind of turmoil of not having hope led you down to, obviously, the extreme situation that you were in and feeling suicidal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I created this life, and then I knew that if I was to try to do something else, I was going to have to start over again. What I usually say is nobody thought I was going to be successful. I wasn't supposed to be successful. I was the kid who didn't go to college. I was the kid without a dad. I was the kid who worked at the gas station. I was the kid who was not going to make it. Then somehow I made it. I could not imagine a world where I was able to be more successful than I was. I felt like I got lucky. There's no way this is going to happen again. So I think a lot of that played into, there's no way my future will ever be as good as my present is. It's not possible. Even though right now my present is terrible, circumstantially, I don't think I'll ever get beyond this. That's what really, really made it hard for me, is I had felt like I had overcome the odds, and I just didn't believe I was going to ever be able to overcome the odds again in a better way. I cannot imagine a world where Kevin is more successful and actually fulfilled. I can't imagine it. So that was the hopelessness for me. I'm going to start over. I'm going to go back to making $0 an hour, and I'm going to have to go into debt and figure all this out. There's no way I'm going to make it. Nobody gets to live their dreams from where I come from.
Yeah. I mean, I can relate to that just so easily. It's where we're going to go next with this podcast, I guess. And that's on about starting up your own podcast. And, we can definitely relate on that. I've got to ask you, because I still get nervous. How was your mental health doing that podcast for the first time? You're obviously in a much better headspace, having moved on and especially seeking the help and then forming the partnership with your friend. How nervous were you? I'm just going to go straight in there and ask that.
More nervous than I think anybody would possibly imagine.
Yeah.
I don't know if you would have been able to tell, but it took me roughly 150 podcast episodes to feel remotely good. 150. Yep. That's a lot of episodes to not feel like you're good. And Andrew, we had some big guests. We had some pretty big guests early on because the landscape of podcasting in 2018 and 2017 was different than it is today. So I was just riddled with self-doubt. I had very low self-belief. I felt like an imposter. I always felt like everybody knew I didn't know what I was talking about. I was very, very, very nervous for a long, long, long time. And this is how I know. At this point, I've done close to 3,000 episodes between our shows and other shows and guesting. And I've probably given, I don't know, maybe a dozen in-person speeches. Done a lot of virtual speeches. If you said, Kev, you're going to talk to 5,000 people from where you're sitting right now, I don't know if I would be nervous at all. If you said you're going to talk in front of 50 people in person, I would be 9 out of 10 nervous.
Yeah.
I've just done this setup, this rep, this microphone, these headphones, this camera, these lights. I've just done this so many times. I haven't spoken in person as much. So it reminds me of what it was like in the beginning of the podcast. Yeah, I was supremely nervous, probably more nervous than anybody can imagine, probably more nervous than you were at the beginning of yours. I don't know. I don't want to compare it, but I was terrified.
Yeah, it's a truly, truly terrifying experience. I'm not going to beat around the bush for that one.
That's why I try to make it, I always try as a guest to make it easier. Like,
yeah,
I don't care if you mess up. I have messed up more than you have, for sure. You've just never seen it. This is the weird thing. I think one of the most common misconceptions that holds people back is where somebody is today is where they've been forever, and where you are today is where you've been forever. You said this in the beginning. Most people don't know you yet. Most of the people that are listening to this podcast. So they're just going to assume that I showed up here the way I am today. That's not the case. You just missed the first 1,800 episodes when nobody was listening. And somebody out there might think, well, where I am today is where I am forever. No. Just like where Andrew was in episode 1 is not where Andrew is today, where Kevin was in episode 1. I think that's such an easy trap to fall into because it seems like people are overnight sensations. They weren't popular enough for me to know that they were an artist or a singer, a songwriter, whatever, a director, right?
Yeah. That it's so true what you say. Like you say, we come to our perception is coherently flawed at times. And like you say, we like to view others, like you said, in that mindset that this is exactly how they've been since they've started this from day one. And I'm going to make a judgment on them from what I see right now. And yeah, that's just not the story. I've heard you talk about imposter syndrome on another podcast, and you just mentioned it there. Could you, just for anybody listening that maybe doesn't understand that term or its context, could you just explain exactly what imposter syndrome means to you?
To me, imposter syndrome is whatever your deepest fear is about yourself, the fear that other people are going to find out that fear and then directly point it out to you. So it's usually when it comes to like skill acquisition. I am somebody who I get nervous before I go on certain podcasts with people that are ahead of me. PhDs, millionaires, people who are just super, 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 super successful. In my mind, they're thinking that I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, and they are waiting for me to get found out. That's what imposter syndrome to me is. You're afraid everybody is going to find out what you are afraid you're going to get found out for. That isn't real. And it becomes this weird cycle. But I don't know if imposter syndrome ever goes away, / if it's supposed to go away, if you're growing. If you want imposter syndrome to go away, I can give you the way. Stop growing and then stop doing things that scare you. And just live wherever you are and just stay comfortable. I'm willing to bet your imposter syndrome will pretty much go away because you're not expanding what you're capable of. Now I kind of think it's there to live. And instead of trying to get rid of it, I think I have to learn how to coexist with it. And that's been a very important pivot for me over the last couple years, but this year specifically.
Well, there's always a bit in every episode that I do that I guess will say something and straight away it completely resonates with me. And the way you're explaining that, the timing is so bizarre. 2 days ago, I got back to doing personal solo podcast where I talk about my own mental health and how things have been going. And oddly, what you're saying there is exactly how I define my intrusive thoughts. It's my insecurities about what others perceive me to potentially fail at. I don't want to fail. So that's where the direction of my thoughts usually go. And that was just incredibly refreshing to hear it from another perspective as well. And that's where I'm going to lead with my next question is, how much do you learn about yourself from having these types of conversations, from speaking to others? That, do you ever get that light bulb moment when somebody says something and you go, yeah, that makes sense about me. That makes sense about my issue. Does that still happen quite frequently to you?
All the time. Yeah, I did a podcast episode with someone maybe earlier this year, maybe 6 months ago. And in the middle of it, they said, "Hey, I have to be honest with you about something." And I said, "Uh-oh, what have I done?" And they said, "I feel like when I looked you up and when I looked at your content and when I saw the website, I assumed that you were going to be a meathead who just spit out motivational stuff." And he said, "I'm sorry that I came in with that preconceived notion. You're truly a wonderful human being." And I started crying on this podcast. It was, for me, character means more than anything. I don't care if you think I'm a good speaker. I don't care. I do, but not as much as if you say, "Kev, you're a good man." That's what I'm playing for. I want to be a good man. I want to be a good person. Nothing else matters if I lose sight of that. And ultimately, this person gave me that. They said, "You're a wonderful human. You're a great man." And I started crying. And I was like, why am I crying? What's going on here? Why is this hitting me so hard? I really, really want the approval of men because I didn't have a dad growing up. I am terrified of disappointing men more than women. I love talking to women. It's super easy. Super easy. Men is harder for me. I learned that being interviewed on somebody's show and then them having the courage and vulnerability to just tell me that live. I always say it's kind of selfish, my podcast, because I get to learn more than anybody else does because I'm doing the episodes every day. And in order to do the episodes, I have to come up with content. In order to come up with content, I have to reflect. So it's kind of a cheat code. I have to get better for a living. I have to become more self-aware. All of those things are non-negotiables. That's something I have to do. So yeah, I have learned more about myself from the podcast than I have learned about anything else. It's not close. I've learned a lot of strategies and stuff, but I've learned way more about me because after the episode, I go and there's life. There's life that happens before and after the episode that I think it's just really hard to remember that.
Yeah, and the I don't know how I'm going to even put this one into words. So I started that bit with how weird it was that you spoke about your last bit. And then we went on to how a guest affects you. And I'll tell you a little bit of something about myself is I grew up with a single mother for my early life. My dad was kind of in and out of it, and he passed away when I was 25, I think. So about 12 years ago. And just when you said there that you don't like disappointing males, that was the moment that just hit me right there as well. And that's me learning about myself. And so thank you for that. And,
You're very welcome.
Yeah, validation of your knowledge again, and just how powerful words can really alter somebody's well-being. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Can we freestyle here for a second?
Of course we can.
Are you open to being vulnerable for a second?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, 100%.
I figured as much, but I want to check. What is your deepest fear that I'm going to think about you? Is if there is one?
Probably, I always go with the answer that comes to mind as you're asking the question, because that has to be the realist that gets put into the forefront. And straight away there would have been, again, probably failure. It's just a word that just came up into my head that maybe this guy doesn't think I'm actually really that good. Maybe this guy, is expecting me to fail. That sort of narrative is kind of what I get from a lot of exchanges when I speak to males as well. So yeah, I would say that's probably my most self-conscious aspect about myself. Yeah.
I told Andrew this in the preamble. I guess it's technically not called preamble in our pre-chat. I looked up the show and I looked up what you were doing, and I immediately was like, I love this dude.
Thanks.
So for me, I don't care what happens. I do not care what happens when I don't care. I like you. Yeah. And I respect you for what you're doing, and I see me in you and you in me. So I don't know if that'll change anything, but just from my perspective of yours, I'm not thinking about that at all. I'm thinking about your character, and I'm thinking about what a wonderful human being you are. And that is what resonates with me more than anything. So I just wanted to give you that.
Oh, well, honestly, you talk about crying on podcasts. I've not quite cried on this one. That's, Yeah, thank you so much.
You're very welcome, my friend.
That's beautiful words. Now I lost my chain of thought. I'll just get back to my notes for a second.
No worries.
So, obviously, you manage your mental health. I think, would it be fair to say that you manage your mental health a lot better now than what you did years ago? Is there anything that you actively try to do daily that helps you stay on top of your mental health?
Exercise is one. I notice a drastic difference in everything when I go to the gym versus when I don't. It's huge for me. It is absolutely huge. Even if it's not crushing a workout, even if I go do cardio, there's something about, hey, Kev, you know this is good for you. You know you'll be grateful once you did it. Go do it. That this is something that I am ashamed that I didn't understand this sooner. I pretty much get 8 hours of sleep every night. Andrew, for most of my life, I would be running on 4 or 5 hours of sleep every night. I didn't realize how much that was hurting me cognitively and definitely not helping mental health, for sure. Mm-hmm. I would say those are probably the two biggest ones. I journal every day now, which is nice. We have a journal. But yeah, no, probably those two. This is one of the hard things for me. When I left my job, my depression essentially went away.
Yeah.
So much of that, I think, was just circumstantial, just overwhelm and uncertainty and just out of alignment. My anxiety got way worse because I was way more uncertain. But now this weird thing happened where for the first 3 years, I was so far outside of my comfort zone, an unhealthy amount, probably did damage in the long run, genuinely, unfortunately. But now the amount of pressure that I can take without getting anxious is just way different. It's weird. It's something to the effect of when you work really, really, really hard on yourself internally and externally, the external world raining on you just doesn't affect you the same. It still affects me, but a day in my life today would have killed me 5 years ago. Now it's different. I still get anxious at times, but very, very rarely and very, very different. So I would say self-improvement. Yeah, I try to get a little bit better every day because when I do, I feel like the external world just doesn't affect me the way it used to.
Yeah, that's, pardon me. That's such a strong point again. Again, something that I relate to there. Sorry, I've just totally lost my chain of thought. I'm just going to put a mark on there.
No worries, buddy.
I'm just, there was a point that I was going to go back into there and it's totally skipped my mind.
I love that this is happening because it's quite literally your biggest fears coming up in the middle of the interview.
It really is. I'm getting exposed right now.
It's going to be totally fine.
And we're going to deal with it. And
it's going to be totally fine. Yep.
Put a little. In fact, I might not even edit this out.
I challenge you to leave it in.
All right. Okay. I'll leave it. Okay. I'm going to reboot the brain. What do we actively do to stay on top of mental health? Spoke about the gym, journaling. I'm sorry, would you be able to repeat roughly what you were saying at the end there, towards the end of that part, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I feel like the more, and do I have any science to prove this? No. I feel like the more I work on myself from a self-improvement perspective, the more I learn, the more I pour into myself, the less the external world affects me. The stresses just aren't the same. I'm still stressed out, but it's not enough to drive me over the edge where I have to shut down and just clear out the day and go lay in bed. It's just not like that anymore. Yeah,
I'm back on track now. I know where I was going to go because that's so true. Because last year I had a terrible, terrible affair with anxiety, and I was just super, super anxious the entire time, super agitated, super pumped up. It's like you literally feel like you could fly off the rails at any time. And since then, I've went on this, I guess you could call it a spiritual, like you say, a self-improvement for sure journey that I've really kind of started learning a lot about myself. And it's just so true what you say there, that once you kind of handle the worst, the ultimate worst of the anxiety, everything does feel just subjectively that little bit easier. What I mean by that is, something can happen in my regular job that last year would have completely sent me over the edge. Whereas now you can kind of take a minute. A really important quote that I learned from reading the book was obviously always put yourself in somebody else's shoes first before acting out of judgment. And I think that's so true, because that's something that we are flawed at quite a bit. And more so when we talk about mental health and the judgment and stigmas attached to that. So yeah, again, just another completely relatable point back to yourself. As natural as this was always going to go.
I love it.
as do I. And that bit is definitely staying in. Let's say I'm completely relaxed now.
Nice.
And yeah, enjoy it. So was there a moment to you, I often go on about kind of seeking validation from when imposter syndrome is at large. Was there a moment of validation then when you switched to podcasting? Maybe it was a stat, maybe it was a guest, maybe it was just a feeling that you got after a certain episode that cemented that idea, the notion to get into podcasting, to delve into it. Were you validated at any point that, yeah, this is right, I've made the right decision here?
Yeah, not really. No, I mean, yes, and I did the first episode I think I ever did. Alan commented on my social media and said, "Kev, I love the way you think, man. Like, it's awesome. This is great. This is super deep. This is great. This is going to be a transformational podcast." But this is the thing I've always tried to tell people, and maybe this will resonate depending. It seems like the direction we're going, it probably will. It's not about what you say to me about me. It's what I think about myself in the moment. So we could get off here and you could say, "Kev, that was a flawless interview." I'm thinking of the thing that I didn't know what to say. I'm not thinking about what you're saying to me. I'm thinking about me. Getting external validation is nice and it's helpful, but my internal dialogue matters to me more than the external validation, because external validation is fleeting. Internal dialogue is what matters to me. So we got some really good, in the beginning, we got people saying, "You guys are the best interviewers we've ever come across. You're amazing." All of that. We got that. You've changed my life. You've saved my life. All of those amazing messages. But it always goes back to, if I have self-doubt, I need to figure out and get right with myself. That's a huge piece of it. This happened at one point, and one of my biggest fears came true and ended up being a positive. Somebody reached out to me on Instagram and they said, "Hey, I don't mean to be condescending or negative, but what gives you the credibility and the expertise to be a coach?" And I was like, "Oh no, I'm found out. This person knows I don't know what the hell I'm talking about." And I thought about it, initially got triggered, thought to myself, we should have a physical altercation with this person. Let's just put up our dukes. We'll handle this the old fashioned way. And then I thought about it and I crafted a message and I said, "Well, I appreciate the question as much as it stings. At this point, I've done 300 podcast episodes. I've had the privilege of interviewing some of the most successful people on the planet. I've read, at that point, probably dozens of books. I've been tracking habits now every day for however many years. I've studied self-improvement. I've essentially turned my life around. I believe I can help somebody get from maybe their level A to maybe level B, C, D, whatever." Something about sending that message to somebody else with all of the proof that I had accumulated helped me so much with imposter syndrome, because that was my deepest fear. My deepest fear was somebody going to say, "Kev, you don't know what you're talking about. How do you coach people?" Then when I put that into writing, line after line after line after line, it made more sense to me why I was actually capable of doing it. That was probably one of the more validating things, because it changed my internal dialogue.
Yeah.
I would say that was probably the most validation that I got.
Yeah, that's so true, because I get it. I'll do an episode, you'll get people coming up, say, "Oh, that was brilliant, that was really good, that was really good." But internally with me, it didn't quite sit 110% for me. So I'm never going to be okay with that notion. Like I say, I don't know about you, but I am the world's highest critique of myself. It's impossible to be flawless when the intrusive thoughts come in. How have you changed since you started podcasting? Looking back at the person that you were and the person that you know about now, what are the key things that you've learned about yourself, about Kevin, and how you've grown as a person?
In the beginning, I was wildly insecure. You probably wouldn't have known it, but I was afraid of, again, imposter syndrome is a big one. I would villainize people who knew more than I did because it was easier for me to feel bad about them than it was to feel about me. That's something I did in the beginning that I was able to shift pretty quickly. But I still have those moments. My business partner is one of the most extraordinary humans. He probably is the most extraordinary human I've ever met. He's just different. There's something different about him. He's just different. I mean, he's exercised every day for the last 1,000 days. And that's on top of 8 podcast episodes a week. He's just different. He's a cyborg. He'll still say stuff occasionally where it's like, dude, how arrogant are you? And then I think to myself, is this a me thing or is this a him thing? Because realistically, he's done everything he said he was going to do. So I don't think it's arrogant. I think it's just in the future, oh, okay, this is probably going to be a me thing. That's something I still am playing with to figure out what's real and what's not. That's something I learned for sure. The other thing that I learned is I really like helping people. I thought I knew that in the beginning, but I still do. I don't ever want to get to the place where I can't do stuff for free. And that's not something I think a lot of business owners say. I'm afraid I will get to the place where I can't do stuff for free. I coach people in my DMs all the time. I don't care. I don't care that I should charge for it. I don't care. I like it. That's why I started. I started to help people. I didn't start to make money. I started to help people. That's something about me that I didn't understand, and I've learned that a ton. And then I've learned that I am capable of getting good at stuff because I am very gritty. I'm very resilient, and I tend to be pretty consistent. So I never thought I would be good at this. I never thought I would have the confidence for somebody to say, hey, Kevin, give me a minute on motivation and go. I never thought I could be that guy, ever. I never thought I would be capable of speaking into a microphone, putting words together that make sense and maybe motivating or inspiring somebody. Never knew that was going to be a thing. So I just underestimated drastically the amount of evolution someone can have over time.
Yeah, that's such a good way of putting it. The evolution of yourself, because that's what we are. That's how we live. We evolve as we progress with ourselves, and we become. There's nothing wrong. I think I put a quote on the other day that today could be today could be the first day of the rest of your life. You just have to choose it to be. Yeah. We got there eventually with that quote.
Quotes are hard, my friend.
I'm slightly rusty. It's
all good. Quotes are hard because if you forget the first word, it's almost like you don't know any of it.
Yeah, and I stutter sometimes really badly. So if I go in for that first word and it's just like a 1 or an I, and that's it, gone. It's not a quote anymore. It sounds terrible. It's almost ineffective.
It's all good, my friend.
It's all good. How does it help to have a business partner? This is, I guess, maybe more of a personal question for my own. Just gotten into podcasting. I do this completely solo, and it's a fun little venture for its first year. Obviously, like you say, you could have a point pointed out to you quite bluntly to your face. That must help you though in the long run. It must be said.
For sure. Yeah. It sucks in the short run.
Yeah.
But at this point, Alan and I have both agreed, just tell me the truth. If I don't know something, it's going to hold back our business. And if it holds back our business, it's holding back the entire team. It's holding back the entire community. It's holding back Alan. It's holding back his potential family. It's holding back me, my family. It's not about me. There's so many more layers to this business than me. I'm a piece of it, cool, but it's not about me. I think the most beneficial thing is Alan and I are completely opposite. So I am somebody who is wildly emotional. He is somebody who is hyperlogical. Two humans like us usually don't work together for 7 years like we have. But we have very similar core values, core beliefs, and core aspirations. We both want to bring self-improvement to the world. We both want to change the world in our own way. It wouldn't work if we didn't have that. Neither of us are entitled. I don't think I should be more successful than I am. I'm as successful as I should be based on the things that I've done and the things that I've stopped doing. So that works really, really well. So I think it's one thing is you always have built-in accountability. If Andrew and I are going to the gym, I'm more likely to go because Andrew's going to be there waiting for me. One of the reasons we've never missed an episode is because of that. It's not about me. It's not about Alan. It's about the community. And there's two of us making sure that it gets done. So that's a piece of it. The necessity is extra because I have somebody who, if I don't grow, is going to leave me behind. Yeah, that's scary, and that's my deepest fear, but it's also a powerful motivator. And I've been able to learn things and see things from the other side that I just never would have had the opportunity to see. And I've learned so much about myself that I just never would have. I wouldn't have been able to learn the things I've learned about me if I didn't have that mirror. Just like Alan has learned a lot about himself through me. But it's not, we sit down and here's the lesson plan. It's, how did you know that? How did you know that was going to happen? How did you predict that? Oh, I don't know. I just did. No, tell me how. Like, what were the things that, oh, interesting. Then we both learned something from that. So it has been invaluable. I honestly, if I'm being very honest and transparent, I probably would have quit. I would not have made it this far. I wasn't capable in the beginning of being as consistent as I needed to be. I would have tried, but I definitely would not be nearly as successful as I am today. And I might not have made it here, being very honest.
Yeah. I'd say it's certainly something that in the future I'm going to look towards branching out, because like you say, it's having that it's kind of like an automation between a pair. Like you say, when it works in tandem, it can work so beautifully.
Yeah.
And like you say, when you're getting the reminders, when you are getting potentially exposed to your fears as well, that's only going to help you in the long run. I mean, yeah, that's a really, really, really strong message. I like to, towards the end of episodes, focus back onto the listener and what any guests that we have on the Borderline podcast can learn specifically. I'd just like to first ask you kind of the first question of that. And why do you believe it's so important that, like, so me and you have these conversations about mental health, about being open, about self-improvement, and about trying to move on in the future almost together, because a lot of people feel so isolated and alone?
I feel like the more conversation there is around a topic, the less taboo it is. So I feel like podcasts like this that talk about stuff that a lot of people don't want to talk about become a good opportunity for somebody to listen to it, become familiar with it, and then maybe open up to it. That's a big piece of it. I think the other thing too is, I don't know, most people only talk about their successes, but you got to understand, a success is made up of 1,000 failures. You just don't see the failures because people don't broadcast them widely. You want to see me with the trophy on the podium and the medal. You don't want to see me crying into my pillow at 3:00 in the morning because I'm so stressed out. You don't want to see that. That's not sexy content. So I think it's that. If you're going to talk about your success, there has to be the 500 failures or mistakes or obstacles, the resistance that you had to overcome, because that is the journey. If a movie was opening scene, champion is the champion, and he's the best ever of all time. He or she faced no adversity. They don't lose at all. And then at the end of the movie, they're even more successful than they were at the beginning. Nobody wants to see that movie. There's no emotion. There's no growth. There's no contrast. There's no conflict.
Yep.
That's why these conversations are important, because behind the person that you see today is X amount of years of experiences. And hopefully you resonate, collective you will resonate with something in some way, and it'll help you become aware of something or make a different decision. Ultimately, that's it. Will this podcast change your life? Probably. I mean, it's possible, to the degree that you do something with the feelings you have after you listen to it.
And sorry, I just froze there again.
No worries. I went off on a tangent. So
no.
If you see me totally looking fine. Up, it's because there's a bug flying around. I was trying to make sure it wasn't a bee.
Oddly, I've had a little fly flying around here as well for the last 20 minutes, and I've been wanting to swat it, but I know that it's in that area right in front of my camera. I'll go with my penultimate question for you, Kevin, and focusing on advice for others. I'm going to learn a little bit about this, so I'll ask it because it'll be a personal question from me to you as well. You've been from the very starting point of podcasting, and you're now incredibly successful at it. What message do you give to anybody in the podcasting? Maybe they're just starting out, maybe they're a year in it like myself, or even somebody in a couple of years' time. What advice is there to keep at it and not to give up? Because that is obviously a thought that does appear in our head quite frequently, unfortunately.
The first question I always ask people is, why did you start? Because if we think of it from a mastery, impact, profitability standpoint, If you started it for impact, you can get impact every time you sit in this microphone. I don't care if it's one person or 10 people. That's impact. That's more impact than you had yesterday. If you did it for mastery, you don't need anybody to listen because you're getting better at the craft every time you do it. If you did it for profitability first, that's when we have to have a conversation. Just because it's hard to make money with a podcast. Yeah. It's even harder to make meaningful, life-changing money with a podcast. So what I would say is you have to dial in the strategy that's going to work for you. As much as I'd love to say that so many people loved what we talked about and we loved the fact that we were vulnerable and they reached out and they said, hey, I want to give you money. That doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. That is so incredibly rare. Without strategy, you probably aren't going to get further than you are today. Mm-hmm. We had a coach, his name's Coach Michael Burt, very successful speaker, coach, businessman. And Alan asked him a question. He said, I don't mean this with malice or any of that, but why should somebody hire a coach? And Coach Michael Burt said, it's a great question. He said, because I know how to do it and you don't yet. That's all. That's it. In the simplest form, a coach knows how to do it and you don't yet. It doesn't have to be a coach in this example. Find a podcast about podcasts. I have a podcast that's free, all about podcasting every week. We can talk about that at the end if you want. YouTube, books, reach out to people. You got to find the strategy. I don't think people don't succeed because they don't want to succeed. It's because they never find out how. And I know it sounds overly simplistic. Thank you, Kev. Tell us the strategy. The strategy is specific to everybody. Andrew's strategy is going to be different than mine. Can I raise your awareness on what strategies work? Sure. But without the strategy, you're just kind of relying on luck. And if luck was predictable, we'd all go play the lottery and we'd be wealthy, but it doesn't work that way. So really dial in the strategy. I've noticed two types of people. There's people who don't care about their audience at all, and they are hyper focused on strategy. They tend to make money because they're just out there doing deals. And then there's the person that I love and I love working with. It's the person who is just so heart-driven and they love this and they want to help people and they believe they have a mission and a purpose and a message, but they just don't know the strategy. If that's you got to seek out the strategy. If you're somebody who knows the strategy and you don't care about your audience, whatever. You do you. You're not necessarily my cup of tea.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. That's brilliant advice. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Yeah, you're very welcome.
And I guess the kind of final message from you to the listener, and this is what I like to do with every episode, and that is, do you have a message for anybody listening tonight that potentially is struggling with their mental health? Maybe they are looking to reach out to that friend that they are vulnerable, but they're not too sure how. Could you just give any advice personally from what you've learned over the years as well and a message to them?
I would say, even if you're not struggling, sit down and make a list of people that you feel safe with, regardless of where you are, because eventually you might need that list. But I don't know if I have a good piece of advice, honestly, because it's hyper personal and it's hyper specific to what you're going through. I would say this: you matter more than you probably give yourself credit for. That I have a deep belief in that. I believe that your future can be brighter than you think it can be, coming from the guy who thought his future was dark and dim and nothing was going to happen. My life is so much different than I thought it was ever going to be. I've worked very diligently and I've had people help me and I'm blessed. And I also came from a place where I didn't think any of this was possible. So I think there's duality there. I would say do the smallest thing you can possibly do to feel progress. You don't have to get up and go to the gym and do an hour. You don't have to clean the entire house. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do that. Maybe it's getting out of bed. Cool. Awesome. Progress is personal. Maybe it's making your bed. Cool. Awesome. Progress is personal. I would say focus on personal progress, because my version of progress and Andrew's version of progress and this person, it's different, right? It's different. So you have to focus on what feels like progress to you. And if you were messaging someone or calling someone, I would probably just say, hey, would you mind listening to me for a minute? Because I think one of the common things that can happen is when you reach out to someone, they immediately try to solve your problems. That's not necessarily what you're looking for, right? Maybe you're just looking to vent. Maybe you're just looking to feel heard and expressed. So, hey, Andrew, I was wondering if you'd mind listening to me for a couple minutes. I would just like to get something off my chest. That's probably where I would start.
That was so simple and effective, and yet again so touching as well. Once again, I'm learning from you, Jedi Master. So Kevin, obviously, like you just touched on there, you coach, you instruct others with your podcasting. Could you just kind of run us through to finish off with, what does a typical week of Kevin now look like to the typical week of Kevin of past?
Oh, man. Typical week of Kevin past, if we said like 25-year-old Kev, he would get in a van on Sunday. He would drive anywhere from 6 to 14 hours to a job site. Some days he would work an 8-hour day after getting there. He'd live in a hotel for that entire week. He would work 8 hours, go to the gym. I was always going to the gym. We'd go out and party. We'd go to the bars. We'd go to the casinos. And then I would come home to an empty house and just be lonely. That was my life in my mid-20s. Now, man, I wake up at 6. I go out into the living room. I do my mobility. I listen to a book. And again, this isn't like morning routine porn. You don't have to do this. This isn't the only reason I'm quote unquote success. There's a lot of things you can do. This is just what works well for me. I'm not saying you have to do it. I get up at 6. I go out into the living room. I put my AirPods in. I'm listening to a book. I do my 20 minutes of mobility, come into the office, crack an energy drink, always. Zoa. I have a Zoa every morning before I go to the gym. I batch my WhatsApp messages. I do my emails. I make sure clients are taken care of. I make sure I'm communicating with the team. Everything's good here. Boom, boom, boom. Go to the gym, 7:30 to 8:30 usually. Come home, shower, and then I'm on meetings from 10 a.m. until 6 p.m., whether it's podcasts, coaching calls, speeches, other podcasts, whatever it may be. And then if I don't have something, I have a giant checklist of stuff that I work my way through to make sure I'm making progress in the business. That's Monday through Friday. Saturday, I usually have a back office day. I record social media content, whatever it is. I don't usually do calls on Saturday. And then Sunday is a family day. I don't do anything public facing on Sunday, but I still get up at 6 usually. I'll work for an hour and a half before I go to the gym. And then my wife and I spend the day together. That's
fantastic. And like you say, so well driven. And I love how just enthusiastic you are about talking about, just any aspect of your life. And ultimately now it's fascinating to listen. And you've been such a refreshing guest.
I appreciate that. Andrew, I don't ever want to lose sight of the fact that I get to live my dreams.
Yeah.
I work and I'm going to work and I'll work hard, but I'm privileged to have the opportunity to live my dreams. Not a lot of people get to say I am living my dreams. I don't ever want to lose sight of that. This being interviewed on a podcast was a dream for me in the beginning. If I lose sight of that, I'm in trouble. That's how you get entitled. Well, how many listens do you have? Oh, you don't have 1 million listens? Not going to come on. I don't want to be that guy because I would have missed out on this.
Yeah.
I would have missed out on this conversation, meeting you, the perspectives that I have, the lessons that I've learned. I'd miss out on all that. So, yeah.
Yeah, man. That's just the perfect way to finish. What for me has been just about a perfect discussion. Kevin, for me personally, and this isn't even talking about the podcast, I'd like to thank you for what you've given me personally tonight. And that is so much self-reflection as well with what you've said. I've said it many times, you've resonated with me and you've been incredibly relatable. And the effect of that is that you're incredibly inspiring. And I'm sure many other people listening who have potentially had struggles, maybe they're feeling that aspect of hopelessness, will listen to this. And hopefully that dynamic of our conversation will change their mindset slightly. So honestly, thank you so, so, so much.
It was my pleasure. It takes two to tango. So I would mirror that back to you. I would say thank you for being courageous, even though I know you feel rusty and this is the first one in 3 or 4 months. But I'm proud of you for showing up because I can't just show up. you got to show up too. And I think you did a wonderful job of showing up.
Yeah, well, Kevin, thank you so much for coming on the Borderline podcast. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. It's been an absolute pleasure. All the information for this episode and more on Kevin will be in the description below. So if you do want to go check out anything else, be sure to head straight across there. An inspiring, motivational, and fantastic man. Kevin, once again, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Andrew.
And guys, I hope you've enjoyed this. From Kevin and Andrew, from myself, this has been the Borderline podcast. Good night.